For years, Ben and Annie Shephard have been held up as one of Britain's rare, quietly perfect couples. He is the endlessly warm and charming television presenter, the man who can brighten an entire studio with one smile, who can keep chaos under control on live TV, and who has long been admired for his professionalism, kindness, and effortless wit. And she is Annie, the grounded, deeply intelligent woman who has stood beside him long before the celebrity lights, long before the fame, and long before Britain came to love him as one of its most trusted broadcasters. Together, they built something that felt rare in the world of British television, a marriage untouched by scandal, strengthened by loyalty, and defined by a shared sense of purpose. To the world, they were the model of stability, a couple who grew together, built a family together, and carried themselves with a sense of class and humility that made them feel both familiar and aspirational. But behind the breakfast show smiles, the charity work, the successful career, something deeper was happening. Something Ben kept hidden, not out of shame, but out of fear. A secret Annie says he carried quietly for years, until the day she gently insisted it was time for him to stop hiding. A secret that would reshape not just his career, not just their marriage, but the very direction of their future together. Ben's private struggle. When Annie speaks about Ben, she often describes him as grounded, thoughtful, and emotionally open. But she also says something surprising. Ben carries more weight on his shoulders than people ever see. Behind the light-hearted teasing on morning television, behind the patience he shows contestants on Tipping Point, behind the warm, dependable presence the public sees, Ben had been wrestling with a conflict he kept meticulously hidden. A conflict that Annie says had nothing to do with fame, money, or job pressure. It was something far more personal, tied deeply to questions he'd been asking himself for years. Who am I becoming? And is this the life I truly want to live? According to Annie, the truth was this. Ben had quietly been stepping back from parts of the television world long before Britain realized. The reduced commitments, the shift toward more meaningful projects, the focus on family, none of it was accidental. It was deliberate, carefully considered, and deeply emotional. But Ben never told the public why. Not really. Not until Annie encouraged him to reveal the truth, at least to her. The moment that changed everything. Annie says the turning point happened during a period when Ben was at the absolute height of his career. He was hosting multiple shows, fronting major charity events, traveling frequently, juggling early mornings, late nights, and endless expectations. Everyone saw a man thriving, but Annie saw something else. She noticed the subtle exhaustion, the way he'd pause before answering messages, the quiet moments when he'd stare into the distance as though replaying something in his mind. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was late, the house was silent, the boys were asleep, and Ben was sitting at the kitchen table, head in his hands, something Annie rarely saw. She sat across from him and asked softly, "Ben, what's going on? What are you not telling me?" What he confessed that night would reshape their marriage forever. The secret Ben hid for years. Ben told Annie that he felt he was losing himself, not to fame, not to pressure, but to busyness, to a life that never paused, to expectations that never softened, to an identity built around being always available, always upbeat, always working. He said he worried he was missing too many moments with their sons, missing quiet mornings at home, missing the simple life he and Annie once dreamed of, before the television studios, the schedules, the rehearsals, the endless flow of commitments. Then he told her something he had never spoken aloud. "I think I want to walk away from part of this world. Not because I don't love it, but because I don't want it to take the best of me anymore." Annie says those words broke her heart, not because she was disappointed, but because she realized how long he'd been carrying this alone. How long he'd been portraying strength when he was in truth exhausted. How long he'd been afraid to admit he wanted a different future. Why he kept it a secret. Annie says Ben kept his feelings hidden for one heartbreaking reason. He didn't want to let anyone down. Ben Shephard has always built his career on reliability. Producers trust him, guests adore him, viewers feel safe with him. His fear wasn't about losing fame. It was about failing others. He worried, what if stepping back affects the people who depend on me? What if the public thinks I'm ungrateful? What if I'm seen as walking away from opportunities others would give anything to have? He felt trapped between two identities, Ben the presenter and Ben the man, Ben the professional and Ben the husband and father. And for years, the professional side kept winning simply because the world expected it. So he kept the secret. He smiled through exhaustion. He kept saying yes when his heart whispered, "Please slow down." He waited until he felt Annie deserved complete honesty, not the edited emotion he showed everyone else. How this secret changed their marriage. When Ben finally shared the truth, Annie didn't hesitate. She reached across the table, took his hand, and said, "Then it's time to choose us. Not the job, not the expectations, not the image. Us." Annie says that moment remains one of the most intimate of their entire marriage, because it wasn't about drama, or conflict, or sacrifice. It was about clarity. Two people looking at each other and choosing to build a life based on truth, not obligation. After that night, conversations softened, priorities shifted, and the pace of their marriage changed in a way Annie describes as healing. She says Ben became more present, more grounded, more connected to the small joys, cooking dinner, watching football with the boys, walking their dog, being simply Ben. Not Ben Shephard, the presenter, just Ben. His quiet decision to step back. Long before the public noticed the changes, long before it became part of conversations online, Ben had already made up his mind. He didn't want a dramatic announcement, or a headline, or a farewell tour. He wanted to shift quietly, to choose meaning over momentum. So he began saying no to certain projects. He began limiting his workload. He began focusing on roles that felt purposeful rather than performative. Annie says he did it with a calm assurance she hadn't seen in years, not because he was giving up, but because he was finally choosing balance, choosing the life he wanted, not just the life he was offered. The world's misunderstanding. When fans noticed Ben appearing less frequently on certain programs or choosing more selective television roles, many assumed he was diversifying, rebranding, or simply shifting genres. But Annie says the truth was far more emotional. Ben wasn't reinventing himself. He was rediscovering himself. He wasn't chasing new opportunities. He was protecting the parts of his life that mattered most. And he wasn't withdrawing from the spotlight. He was stepping into a life that felt more honest. A life defined by intention, not expectation. How Annie became his anchor. Annie says she didn't encourage Ben to slow down because she wanted him home more. She encouraged him because she wanted him well. Because she saw what the public didn't. The toll, the worry, the internal pressure to keep performing, the longing for a quieter life. She became the voice Ben couldn't yet use, the strength he didn't know how to claim, the clarity he couldn't find on his own. Ben often says Annie changed his life. Annie says she simply helped him return to himself. The future they are now building. Today, Ben and Annie's life looks different. Not drastic, not dramatic, just different in all the ways that matter. More dinners together, more time with their sons, more mornings instead of 3 a.m. alarms, more space to breathe, more life beyond television. Ben hasn't disappeared from the screen, far from it, but the screen no longer defines him. Now he chooses projects that inspire him, that challenge him, that align with the man he wants to be, not the man people expect him to be. Annie says watching him evolve has been one of the greatest joys of their marriage. The truth about Ben Shephard we never knew. The public has always seen Ben as the cheerful presenter, the reliable host, the man who never falters, never complains, never loses his smile. But behind that warmth is a man who made one of the bravest decisions of his life: to choose authenticity over obligation.